Life has a funny way of making you pay for your past mistakes, even when you think you've buried them deep enough. That's what I learned the hard way. I still remember that morning like it was yesterday. The sun was streaming through my bedroom window, and I was standing in front of my mirror, adjusting my favorite blue blazer. At 28, I had finally built the life I'd always dreamed of. My interior design business was thriving. I had just landed a contract to renovate 3 luxury penthouses downtown. My apartment, though small, was in one of the best neighborhoods in Boston, with a cute little coffee shop right below that made the perfect cappuccino. But the best part of my life, that was Alex, my boyfriend of 2 years, who made my heart skip a beat every time he smiled. The way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he laughed at my terrible jokes, how he always remembered to bring me soup when I was sick, and the little notes he'd leave in my purse before heading to work, everything about him was perfect. That morning, I had caught him whispering on the phone, trying to hide something. Usually, this would make any girlfriend nervous, but I knew better. My best friend had accidentally let it slip that Alex had visited several jewelry stores last weekend. The thought made my stomach flutter with excitement. After 2 years together, we were finally taking that next step. I headed to work, my mind filled with daydreams about wedding venues and flower arrangements. My assistant Jenny greeted me with a knowing smile and a stack of fabric samples for our latest project. "Someone's in a good mood today," she teased, probably noticing my inability to stop grinning. If only I had known then that my perfect little world was about to shatter. That the past I'd tried so hard to forget was about to come crashing back into my life like a wrecking ball. You see, 5 years ago, I made a mistake. A 3-month-long mistake named Robert. He was charming, successful, and seemed to understand me in a way no one else did. We met at a charity gala. I was there to network for my then-struggling business, and he was a major donor. One drink led to another, and soon we were seeing each other regularly. But Robert had secrets. He was always mysterious about his personal life, claiming his work required discretion. Being young and naive, I found it exciting rather than suspicious. When he suddenly had to leave for a business opportunity abroad, I was heartbroken but moved on. That evening, as I sat at my desk finalizing some design plans, my phone buzzed with a message from Alex. "Dinner at my parents' place this Saturday. Mom's insisting, says she has big news too." I smiled, thinking this might be it, the perfect moment for Alex to propose with his family around. I had met his mom several times. She was a lovely woman who treated me like a daughter already. His dad was always traveling for business, so I hadn't met him yet. Alex didn't talk about him much, just mentioned he was a successful businessman who was rarely home. Little did I know, fate was about to play its cruelest joke yet. The father I had never met was Robert. The same Robert who had swept me off my feet 5 years ago. The same Robert who was about to become my father-in-law. As I left the office that evening, the city lights twinkling around me, I had no idea that my perfect life was balanced on the edge of a cliff. In just a few days, everything I had built, every happiness I had found, would be tested in ways I never imagined possible. They say ignorance is bliss. As I walked home that night, humming to myself and thinking about wedding dresses, I was living proof of that saying. Because sometimes, the scariest monsters aren't hiding under your bed, they're hiding in your past, waiting for the perfect moment to step back into your life and tear everything apart. Saturday arrived too quickly. I spent hours getting ready, trying to calm my nerves with the thought that this could be the night Alex would propose. I chose a simple black dress, elegant but not too flashy for a family dinner. As I applied my favorite perfume, my hands were shaking so much I nearly dropped the bottle. Alex picked me up at 7, looking handsome in his navy suit. "You okay?" he asked as we drove. "You seem tense." I forced a smile and blamed it on work stress. If only he knew the real reason my heart was racing. The restaurant was one of those upscale places with crystal chandeliers and white tablecloths that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Alex's mom, Grace, was already there, elegant as always in her pearl necklace. She hugged me warmly. "Dad's parking the car," Alex mentioned casually, and my stomach dropped. Then I heard that voice, that familiar, deep voice that used to make my knees weak 5 years ago. "Sorry I'm late, traffic was terrible." I turned slowly, and there he was. Robert, my ex, Alex's father. standing there in an expensive suit, looking barely older than when I'd last seen him. Our eyes met, and I saw the exact moment recognition hit him. He covered it smoothly, but I caught the slight widening of his eyes, the brief clench of his jaw. "You must be the famous girlfriend Alex won't stop talking about," he said, extending his hand. His grip was too tight, his smile too knowing. Throughout dinner, I could barely eat. The expensive salmon on my plate might as well have been cardboard. Robert kept the conversation flowing, telling stories about his business travels, but I felt his eyes on me every time I looked down. He casually dropped references that only I would understand, mentioning that charity gala where we met, the restaurant where we had our first date, all wrapped in innocent-sounding stories about his business dealings. Grace was excited to share her news. She was opening a small art gallery, something she'd dreamed about for years. Alex was genuinely happy for her, but I could only manage weak smiles. Every time I glanced up, Robert was watching me with that slight smirk that made my skin crawl. "Remember that little gallery in the South End?" he said at one point, looking directly at me. "The one with the beautiful contemporary pieces. You'd love it, Grace." My hands shook so badly I had to put down my wine glass. That gallery was where he'd first kissed me, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon when we ducked in to escape the weather. After dessert, when Alex went to help his mom with her coat, Robert leaned close to me. "What a small world," he whispered, his breath hot against my ear. "We should catch up sometime, for old time's sake." Before I could respond, Alex returned, and Robert stepped away smoothly. The drive home was torture. Alex was chatting happily about how nice it was to have his dad back in town, how he hoped we could all spend more time together as a family. Each word was like a knife in my chest. The perfect proposal I'd imagined had turned into my worst nightmare. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, remembering every detail of my relationship with Robert. How he'd pursued me relentlessly, how he'd never mentioned having a family, how he'd disappeared without a real explanation. Now I understood why. He probably found out about Alex and me, realized the horrible coincidence, and ran. Around 3 in the morning, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. A text message. "You've grown even more beautiful. Dinner was lovely. Looking forward to many more family gatherings." My hands trembled as I deleted the message. As I stared at the ceiling, watching shadows dance across it, I realized this was just the beginning. Robert wasn't going to let this go. The gleam in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. He was back to stay, and he was going to enjoy watching me squirm. The perfect life I'd built was starting to crack, and I had no idea how to hold it together. Every time my phone buzzed after that, my heart stopped for a moment, because I knew it was only a matter of time before Robert made his next move, and this time he had everything to gain by watching my world burn. Monday morning started like any other, except for the knot of anxiety that had made itself at home in my stomach. I threw myself into work, hoping to distract myself from the weekend's events. My design studio was my safe space, the one place where I felt completely in control. Then the front desk called up. "There's a potential client here to see you. Says he needs an interior designer for his new office." My assistant looked puzzled when I asked who it was. "Mr. Cooper? He says he's Alex's father." The pencil I was holding snapped in half. Of course. Of course he would do this. Robert walked into my office like he owned it, wearing an expensive charcoal suit and that infuriating smile. "Nice place you've got here," he said, running his fingers along my desk. "You've done well for yourself." "What do you want?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. My assistant was still within earshot. Can't a father-in-law-to-be check out his son's girlfriend's business? He settled into the chair across from me, making himself comfortable. "Actually, I do need an interior designer. I'm setting up a new office downtown, and I've heard such wonderful things about your work." I wanted to scream. Instead, I kept my voice professional. "I'm fully booked for the next 6 months. "Oh, I'm sure you can make an exception for family." He pulled out his phone, showing me pictures of an empty office space. "It's a prime location. Think what it could do for your portfolio." Unless, he paused, that familiar glint in his eye, "you'd prefer I tell Alex about that summer 5 years ago? About how his girlfriend used her?" "Stop." My voice cracked. "Just stop." "Wonderful." He stood up, straightening his jacket. I'll have my assistant send over the details. We should start as soon as possible. Oh, and Grace is planning a family dinner this weekend. Don't forget to bring those design samples I asked for. After he left, I locked myself in the bathroom and tried not to throw up. My phone buzzed. A text from Alex telling me how happy he was that his dad was taking an interest in my business. Another buzz. Robert sending the office address and suggesting a private meeting to discuss design preferences. The next few weeks became a twisted game of cat and mouse. Robert would show up at my office unannounced, always with a legitimate business reason that I couldn't refuse. He'd stand too close while reviewing floor plans, let his hand linger too long when passing me documents. Each interaction was loaded with double meanings that only I understood. Remember that hotel in Cape Cod? He'd say during a client meeting. The one with the beautiful ocean view? That's the kind of feeling I want for my office. My assistant would nod enthusiastically, not knowing that hotel was where we'd spent a weekend together, where he'd promised me the world. The worst part was how he'd woven himself into every aspect of my life. He was the perfect father figure around Alex, giving business advice, showing interest in his career. Grace adored having him back, saying he'd changed, become more family-oriented. Only I saw the real him, the calculated way he was tightening the noose around my neck. My work started suffering. I'd jump every time my phone rang, check around corners before entering rooms. Sleep became a distant memory. I'd lie awake at night, wondering if tomorrow would be the day he finally told Alex everything. One afternoon, while reviewing color swatches in his half-finished office, he closed the door behind us. "You know," he said, voice low, "all this could go away. We could figure something out, just between us. For old time's sake." I threw the swatches at him and ran out, my heels clicking on the marble floor. In the elevator, my hands shaking, I got another text from him. "Dinner at our place tomorrow. Don't be late. And wear that blue dress, you know the one." The blue dress. The one I'd worn the night we met. The one that was still stuffed in the back of my closet because I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. As I sat in my car, trying to steady my breathing, I realized I was trapped. Every move I made pulled me deeper into his web. If I refused to work with him, he'd tell Alex. If I told Alex first, I'd lose him anyway. And with every passing day, the weight of the lies grew heavier. The worst part? A tiny voice in my head kept whispering that maybe I deserved this. Maybe this was karma's way of making me pay for falling for a man who'd turned out to be everything I never wanted to become. The breaking point came on a rainy Tuesday morning. I was checking my emails, trying to focus on work instead of the family dinner planned for that evening, when I noticed something odd in my sent folder. There were emails I didn't remember sending, dozens of them, all addressed to Alex. My heart stopped when I opened the first one. It was an old photo of me and Robert at that charity gala, my head thrown back in laughter as he whispered something in my ear. The next email had more photos. Us walking on the beach, having dinner at expensive restaurants, his arm always around my waist. The timestamp showed they'd been sent 10 minutes ago. My hands shook as I tried to delete them, but it was too late. My phone started buzzing, Alex calling. I let it go to voicemail, then immediately regretted it when his text came through. "We need to talk. Now." I ran to the bathroom and threw up, my breakfast coming up along with all the lies I'd been swallowing. Robert had access to my old cloud storage, of course he did. He'd set it up for me back then, claiming he wanted to help me organize my business files. My assistant knocked on the door. "Are you okay? You look really pale." I barely heard her. My phone kept buzzing. Alex, Grace, even Robert, probably enjoying the chaos he'd created. I couldn't face Alex. Not yet. Not like this. I needed time to think, to explain everything in a way that wouldn't destroy us completely. I grabbed my bag and ran out of the office, ignoring my assistant's concerned calls. The city felt too small suddenly. Every corner held a memory. Here's where Alex and I had our first date. There's where Robert used to meet me for lunch. I found myself at the harbor, watching boats bob up and down in the gray water. My phone wouldn't stop. 20 missed calls from Alex. Texts ranging from confused to angry to heartbroken. What is this? Please tell me these are fake. How could you? Was anything real? Finally, one from Robert. "Oops, looks like your cloud had a leak. Better come clean before things get worse. I sat on a cold bench, rain soaking through my clothes, and opened my photos. There were hundreds more he hadn't sent yet. Each one a bullet he could fire at any moment. Each one a nail in the coffin of my relationship with Alex. A new email notification popped up from my assistant. Alex had shown up at the office looking for me. He'd been crying. Grace was with him. They'd gone through my design files for the office project, finding all the little notes Robert had been leaving, the hidden messages in his design preferences. My phone rang again. This time it was my best friend. "Where are you?" "Alex is losing it. He's telling everyone you've been having an affair with his dad. Grace is devastated. What's going on?" I couldn't breathe. The world was spinning too fast. Everything I'd built, every happiness I'd found, was crumbling like a sandcastle in high tide. And somewhere in his fancy office, Robert was probably watching it all unfold, enjoying the show he'd orchestrated. Another text from Alex. "Dad just called. Says he needs to tell me something important. What else don't I know?" That's when I knew Robert wasn't done yet. The photos were just the opening act. He was going to tell his version of the story, paint himself as the victim, maybe even claim I'd been pursuing him recently. And why wouldn't Alex believe him? He was his father, after all. I stood up, my legs shaking. I had two choices: keep running and lose everything, or face the music and hope that the truth, however ugly, would count for something. My finger hovered over Alex's number. Just then, my phone buzzed with one last text from Robert. "Meeting in my office in an hour. Let's discuss how to handle this situation. Come alone." The rain had soaked through my clothes, but I barely felt it, because I finally understood this wasn't just about ruining my relationship with Alex. This was about power, about control, about a man who couldn't stand that I'd moved on and found happiness without him. Well, if he wanted a showdown, he was going to get one. I was done being the scared little girl in his game. It was time to write my own ending to this story, even if it meant losing everything in the process. The elevator ride to Robert's office felt like ascending to my own execution. My rain-soaked clothes had dried uncomfortably, and my makeup was probably a mess, but I didn't care anymore. I'd spent the last hour walking in the rain, thinking about every mistake that had led me here. The office was exactly as I'd designed it, modern, sleek, with those expensive leather chairs he'd insisted on. Robert sat behind his massive desk, looking irritatingly composed. "Glad you could make it," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "You look, well, you've had better days." "Why?" My voice cracked. "Why are you doing this?" He leaned back, loosening his tie. "You know, when I first saw you with Alex at that dinner, I thought it was some kind of joke. The universe's way of laughing at me. The woman who walked away from me, now dating my son." He chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "I walked away. You disappeared. No explanation, no goodbye, just poof, gone." I was shouting now, years of buried anger finally bubbling to the surface. "Because I found out who you were." He slammed his hand on the desk. "Do you know how it felt? Getting that call from Alex, telling me about this amazing girl he'd met, showing me your picture, realizing that my son was falling in love with me." He stopped, composing himself. "Well, let's just say it was uncomfortable. So you ran away. And now you're back to what? Punish me." "I'm back because this is my family." His voice was cold now. "I've worked too hard, built too much, to let you destroy it. Alex deserves to know what kind of woman he's planning to marry." "Planning to?" The words hit me like a punch. "You knew about the proposal." "Of course I knew. Father-son bonding, remember? He showed me the ring last week. Beautiful choice, by the way. Much nicer than anything I ever gave you." I felt sick. All those times Alex had been excitedly planning the proposal with his dad, Robert had been plotting this, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. "What do you want from me?" I whispered. He stood up, walking around the desk. "Leave him. Tell him you've been cheating, that you're not ready for marriage, whatever story you want. Just end it and disappear." Like I did. "Or what?" "You'll tell him everything." "Newsflash, you already did that this morning." "Oh, those photos." He smirked. "That was just a preview. I have so much more. Emails, messages, hotel receipts. Should I tell him about that weekend in Newport? Or about the promises you made, the things you said?" I stood up so fast my chair toppled over. You're insane. You're actually insane. This isn't about protecting your family. This is about control. You can't stand that I moved on, that I found happiness with someone better than you. The door opened behind us. My heart stopped. Alex stood there, his face a mask of pain and confusion. Grace right behind him, her hand over her mouth. How long have you been there? Robert's composure cracked for the first time. Long enough. Alex's voice was barely a whisper. Long enough to hear you threaten the woman I love. Long enough to understand why you've been acting so strange since you came back. Son, I can explain. Explain what, Dad? How you dated my girlfriend. How you've been blackmailing her. How you were going to use my proposal to hurt her. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. This wasn't how I wanted him to find out, but maybe it was better this way. The truth, raw and ugly, finally out in the open. Grace stepped forward, her face hard. All those business trips, all those late nights. How many other girls were there, Robert? The room felt too small suddenly, the air too thick. Years of lies and secrets were unraveling, and none of us could stop it. I was going to tell you, I said to Alex, tears streaming down my face. I tried so many times, but I was scared. Scared of losing you, scared of what he might do. Alex looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time since entering the room. The pain in his eyes was unbearable, but there was something else there too. Understanding, maybe even forgiveness. Robert moved toward him. Everything I did was to protect you. Stop. Alex's voice was firm. Just stop. You didn't do this for me. You did it for yourself, like you've always done. The perfect family image Robert had tried so hard to maintain was shattering, and we were all caught in the falling pieces. As we stood there in that expensive office, with its perfect design and carefully chosen furniture, I realized that sometimes the truth doesn't set you free. It just shows you who was really in prison all along. The week after the confrontation felt like walking through a fog. I took time off work, ignoring the pile of design projects on my desk. My phone stayed off most of the time. I couldn't bear to see the messages from friends asking what happened, or worse, the silence from Alex. Grace was the first to reach out, surprisingly. She showed up at my apartment one morning, looking tired but determined. "Can we talk?" she asked, holding 2 coffee cups from my favorite cafe downstairs. We sat on my tiny balcony, watching the city wake up. "You know," she said, stirring her coffee absently, "I always wondered about those business trips. The late-night calls, the mysterious meetings. I guess I just didn't want to see it." "I'm so sorry," I whispered. "If I had known he was married, if I had known about Alex." She shook her head. "Don't. You're not the first, apparently." Her voice cracked a little. "After everything came out, I did some digging. Called some old friends, asked some questions I should have asked years ago. There were others, many others." My stomach churned. Of course there were. Robert's perfectly crafted lies hadn't been created just for me. "Alex is staying with his cousin," she continued. "He needs time to process everything. But he's not angry at you, not really. He's angry at his father, at the lies, at the way Robert tried to manipulate everyone." I stared into my coffee, watching the cream swirl. I should have told him sooner. The moment I realized who Robert was, I should have been honest. "Fear makes us do strange things," Grace said softly. Robert was very good at using that fear. Later that day, my assistant called. "The clients are asking about their projects. And Mr. Cooper's office design is still unfinished." "Cancel it," I said firmly. "Refund his deposit. I don't care about the lost revenue." The next few days brought more revelations. Grace's friends started talking, sharing stories about Robert's past behavior. Business partners came forward with tales of questionable deals and broken promises. The perfect businessman image he built was crumbling, one exposed lie at a time. I threw myself into work, staying late at the office, taking on new projects to keep my mind busy. But everywhere I looked, I saw reminders of what I'd lost. The coffee shop where Alex and I had our morning dates. The park where we planned our future. Even my own designs reminded me of him. He'd helped me choose colors for so many projects. One evening, as I was locking up the office, I found a small box on my desk. Inside was the ring. The one Alex had shown Robert, the one that was supposed to symbolize our future together. There was a note. I didn't know how to give this back. I'm sorry things turned out this way. I sat at my desk and cried for what felt like hours, not just for the lost relationship, but for all the dreams that had shattered along with it. The house we planned to buy, the family we'd hoped to build, the life we'd imagined together. Grace called again the next day. Robert had moved out, headed to their vacation house upstate. She was filing for divorce. It's time, she said. I spent too many years ignoring the signs, making excuses. No more. Alex still hadn't reached out directly, but his best friend told me he was doing okay, all things considered. He'd thrown himself into his work, just like me. Sometimes, when things get too broken, all you can do is keep moving forward. The media caught wind of the story, not the personal details, thankfully, but Robert's business dealings had attracted attention. His company's stock took a hit as more questionable practices came to light. The perfect life he tried so hard to control was unraveling thread by thread. One rainy evening, much like the one when this all started, I found myself walking past Robert's office building. The lights were off, the fancy furniture visible through the windows. All that careful planning, all those design choices we'd argued over, it meant nothing now. Just an empty space filled with broken dreams and exposed lies. My phone buzzed. A text from Grace. Having dinner with Alex tonight. He asked about you. I think he's ready to talk when you are. I stood there in the rain, staring at those words. Maybe some things could be salvaged from the wreckage after all. Not the fairy tale romance we'd planned, but something else. Something built on truth this time, not lies. Because sometimes when everything falls apart, you find out who you really are in the pieces. And maybe, just maybe, those pieces can be put back together into something different but stronger than before. 6 months can change everything. I learned that sitting in my therapist's office, talking about how life had transformed since that rainy day in Robert's office. She'd helped me understand that healing isn't linear. Some days you move forward, others you slide back, but eventually you find your way. My design business was thriving, surprisingly. Maybe people were drawn to the authenticity I now brought to my work. No more trying to please difficult clients just because I was afraid of confrontation. No more doubting my instincts. The truth had set me free in ways I hadn't expected. Grace's art gallery opened in spring. She'd transformed her pain into something beautiful, filling the space with works that spoke of renewal and hope. I helped with the interior design, my wedding gift to her and her new partner, a kind-hearted art professor she'd met through the gallery. You should come to the opening, she said one day over coffee. Alex will be there. My heart still skipped at his name, but differently now. We talked a few times over the past months, awkward at first, then gradually more honest. Coffee meetings that started with long silences and ended with real conversations. We weren't who we used to be, but maybe that was okay. Robert? He'd moved overseas after the divorce, his company struggling under investigation for financial irregularities. His perfect facade had crumbled completely, revealing the cracks that had always been there. Last I heard, he was trying to rebuild his life somewhere in Europe. Part of me hoped he'd found peace, or at least understanding of the pain he'd caused. The gallery opening was packed. I stood in a corner, admiring a particularly striking painting of a broken mirror reflecting a sunrise. It's about perspective, a familiar voice said behind me. How something broken can still show beauty. Alex looked good. Tired, maybe, but more real than I'd ever seen him. Your mom's done amazing work here, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She has. He paused, studying the painting. You know, I spent months being angry. At Dad, at you, at myself for not seeing what was happening. But anger's exhausting. I know, I whispered. I was angry too. At myself mostly. He turned to face me fully. I've been seeing someone. A therapist, I mean. She's helped me understand that what happened, it wasn't about us, not really. It was about Dad's issues, his need for control. My therapist said something similar, I admitted, about how we get caught in other people's stories sometimes, playing roles they wrote for us. A waiter passed with champagne. Alex grabbed 2 glasses, handed me one. To writing our own stories, he suggested. I clinked my glass against his. To truth. We found a quiet spot on the gallery's small balcony. The city lights twinkled below. A gentle reminder that life goes on, no matter what storms we weather. I don't hate you, he said suddenly. I thought I would, but I don't. You were caught in his web, just like Mom was, just like I was. We all played our parts in his performance. I should have told you sooner, I said, the words I'd wanted to say for months finally coming out. The moment I realized who he was, I should have been honest. Maybe, but fear makes us do strange things. And Dad, he knew exactly how to use that fear. We talked for hours that night, about everything and nothing. About healing and hurting and learning to trust again. Not as lovers anymore, but as two people who'd survived the same storm. Later, walking home, I felt lighter somehow. The past wasn't erased. It never could be. But it didn't have the same power over me anymore. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend. Proud of you. Want to grab breakfast tomorrow. Life moves in unexpected circles. A year ago, I thought I had everything figured out. The perfect boyfriend, the perfect future, all neatly planned and organized like one of my design projects. Now, standing in my apartment, looking at the city lights, I understood that perfection isn't real. It's the cracks and repairs that make us interesting, make us human. My therapy journal lay open on my desk. Today's entry was simple. Finally feel like myself again. Not who I was before everything happened, someone new, someone stronger. Because that's the thing about life. It doesn't always give you what you want, but sometimes it gives you what you need. I needed to learn to stand on my own, to face my fears, to understand that love shouldn't come with conditions or controls. The ring Alex had returned months ago sat in my jewelry box. Not as a reminder of what I'd lost, but of what I'd gained, strength, wisdom, and most importantly, the truth about who I really was. Some dreams have to break so new ones can grow in their place. And maybe that's the real happy ending, not the fairy tale I'd imagined, but something more valuable. The ability to look in the mirror and be proud of the person looking back.